theyeshiva.net.
Let's learn together a shtickle Gemara in the Masechta Chulin, Daf Tzadik Aleph Amud Beis. It's the first source in your source sheets. The Gemara tells a story. Amar Rabbi Akiva, Rabbi Akiva said, Sha'alti es Rabban Gamliel ves Rabbi Yehusha be'iklis shel imum. I met my colleagues, Rabban Gamliel and Rabbi Yehusha, in a meat market. Itlis is a market where they sell meat, in a place called Imum. And I asked them the following question. What were these three people doing in a meat market, in an Itlis? Shaholchu likach behema lemishta b'noi shel Rabban Gamliel. They all went to purchase an animal for the feast of the wedding of the son of Rabban Gamliel. He was getting married. They needed food for the wedding. They went to a meat market to buy the meat. Who? Rabbi Akiva, Rabban Gamliel, and Rabbi Yehusha. What does Rabbi Akiva ask them in the meat market? He says, Ksiv, there's a pasuk in Vayishlach. Vayizrach loy hashemesh kasher avares pnuel v'hutzei leia al yirecha. When Yaakov Avinu passes a place called Penuel, the sun shines for him while he's limping on his thigh. Asks Rabbi Akiva, "V'chi shemesh loy levad zorcha v'aloy l'chol olam zorcha." What is the meaning? Vayizrach loy hashemesh, the sun shone for him. The sun shines for the entire world. Amar Reb Yitzchak, so Reb Yitzchak answers, Shemesh haba ba'avuroi zorcha ba'avuroi. Vayizrach loy hashemesh means the same sun that set specifically for him once again rose to shine specifically for him. Where do we know that the sun has set specifically for him, for Yaakov? The Ksiv, there's a pasuk at the beginning of Vayetze. Vayetze Yaakov me Beersheva vayelech Harana. Yaakov leaves Beersheva and he travels to Haran. Next pasuk says, Vayivga ba'mokoyim vayolen sham kivo hashemesh. He encountered the place and he slept there. He dwelled there because the sun set. And he takes from the rocks and he places them at his head. And he has his famous dream. Says Reb Yitzchak. What happened? It says, Vayetze me Beersheva vayelech Harana. He left Beersheva and he went to Haran. So we're expecting the next scene to happen in Haran. He arrived in Haran. But suddenly we learned that he encountered another place, which was not Haran, because after that he actually goes to Haran. So what happened? Kimata l'Haran. Rabbi Akiva came to Haran. He came to Mesopotamia, to Haran, to the city of his uncle Lavan, his mother's brother, where his mother was raised. Omar, and he says, Efshir avarti al makom she'ispalalu avoisei v'ani lo yispalalti. Is it possible that I passed the place where my father, my grandfather, Yitzchak and Avram davened, and I just ignored it? I didn't daven there because he went from Beersheva down south, up north, to the east, to Mesopotamia, northern Iraq, southern Turkey. I missed the place of Yerushalayim where my father's davened. Kad yohiv daiti lemeder, when he decided to return, kofza le'ara. The Gemara says the earth jumped for him. Miyad vayivga b'mokim, and he encountered that space. And he prays there like Avram prayed there, like Yitzchak prayed there. This is, of course, the place that would become the place of the Beis HaMikdash on the Temple Mount, the Harabayis in Yerushalayim. Katzoli, when he finishes davening, boy lemeder, he wants to now return to his destination. Amar HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Hashem says, Tzadik zeh bola beis maloini v'yipatir b'loilina. This tzaddik comes to my hotel, and I'm going to let him off without staying a night. You come for a visit, and you're not even going to stay the night. Miyad ba hashemesh. Immediately the sun set, and Yaakov was forced to stay over the night in Yerushalayim, in the place of the future Beis Hamikdash. Hashem would not allow this prominent guest just to come by and say a tefillah. He needs to stay the night. This is the conversation between Rabbi Akiva, Rabbi Yehusha, and Rabban Gamliel at a meat market, buying meat for the wedding of the son of Rabban Gamliel. That's why it says the sun shone for him. Vayishlach loy hashemesh, the same sun that went down, that set for him years and years and years, decades earlier, on the way from Beersheba to Haran. Now at this point, returning, this sun comes up for him. This is the Maisa in the Gemara. Now obviously, when one reads the story, one wants to know, there's quite many statements of our sages, thousands upon thousands upon thousands of statements and teachings and stories and insights of our sages throughout the entire Talmud, the entire Gemara. Here, we usually don't have the location in which it was said. Here, the Gemara makes sure to tell us that this conversation happened in a meat market where they went to buy meat for the wedding of the son of Rabban Gamliel. Which brings us to the second question is, you're dealing here with three people who were literally the greatest sages of the generation. Rabban Gamliel, in fact, the father of the Chassan, was the Nasi. He was the leader of the Sanhedrin, meaning he occupied the highest spiritual and halachic share of leadership in the Jewish people. He was the Nasi, what you might call the president or the leader of the Sanhedrin, the Supreme Court of the Jewish people, which numbered 71 people, and he was on top of them, so to speak, in the place of Moshe Rabbeinu. This was Rabbi Gamliel. Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Yehusha were also literally of the greatest sages of the time. They couldn't ask somebody to go to the market and buy meat for the wedding. They themselves went to buy the meat. And not only Rabbi Gamliel himself is the father, he brings Rabbi Akiva, he brings Rabbi Yehusha. Then there's the third question. There's a lot of things you could discuss in a meat market. Why, from all things, did Rabbi Akiva decide to discuss this pasuk, Vayizrach loy hashemesh, the sun shining for Yaakov Avinu just like it once set for Yaakov Avinu? You might ask, it says, Amar Reb Yitzchak, where does Reb Yitzchak come here? But the truth is that it seems like Reb Yitzchak was giving over the tradition, because if not, there's something difficult. Rabbi Akiva asks the question, what did they answer him? It seems like Reb Yitzchak gave over what the conversation was. Either Rabbi Akiva answered it, or they answered Rabbi Akiva. So here, let us change the subject for a moment and explore a fascinating question of Tosfos. Tosfos, not here in Chulin, but in another place in Shas Brachos, asks a fantastic question on this Gemara. In order to appreciate the question of Tosfos, though, a little background is necessary. There's a famous Mishnah in Masechta Brachos. It's your second source, Daf Chavav Amud Aleph, the beginning of the chapter Tfilas HaShachar. Zog the Mishnah, Tfilas HaShachar ad Chatzoros, Rabbi Yehuda Omer ad Aleph Shoyos. Morning prayer continues till midday. Rabbi Yehuda says till 4 hours into the day. Tfilas HaMincha. What about Mincha? Ad HaErev. It goes till night. Till night, which generally we define as sunset, even though there is some time between sunset and night, but that time is what we call limbo time, bein hashmashas, and we're not sure what's its status, so generally we assume that night begins with sunset. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, no, ad plag hamincha. Mincha, you could daven only till a time period called plag hamincha, which literally means the half of mincha. Plag in Hebrew means half, like lefalek, pilug, a split. Plag ha-mincha means a half a mincha, and then tfilas ha'erev ein lapva. Davening of Maariv goes throughout the night. What is the argument between the Chachamim and Reb Yehuda about mincha? So in any shul, you always have plag, plag, plag. If you'll ask most people, could you translate what plag is? That's not really necessary. The main thing is to know what time. We could do plag. So it's good once in a while to understand what plag actually means. The time of mincha begins, the real time of mincha begins 9.5 hours after sunrise. When I say 9 hours or 9.5 hours, I don't mean hours of 60 minutes. Those are our conventional hours. An hour is 60 minutes. When we speak in halacha about hours, we often refer to a different type of measurement known as sha'izmaniyos. And what that means is, you take the day, and if the day has, let's say, 10 hours, meaning from sunrise to sunset is 10 hours, you split those 10 hours into 12 parts. So of course, an hour is not going to be 60 minutes. An hour is going to be less than 60 minutes. If the day, like in the summer, goes for 14 hours or 13 hours or 12 and a half hours, so you split up 12 and a half hours into 12 parts, each hour is going to be a little more than 60 minutes. So when you say the time of mincha is 9.5 hours, it doesn't mean 9.5 hours are 9.5 hours. It means you take the daytime and you split it into 12 parts, and you do 9 parts and a half apart, and that's 9.5 hours. Practically, if the sun rises at 6 a.m. exactly, and the sun sets at 6 p.m., which happens twice a year, and that's always the most convenient, because then the calculations are very easy, because if there's exactly 12 hours in the day, then it works perfectly. You divide it into 12 parts, so every hour is 60 minutes. So the time of mincha would be 9.5 hours, which means 3:30. Why is that the time of mincha? We call it mincha ktana, because that's the time till when they used to offer the time that they used to offer the tamid shel bein ha'arbayim, the afternoon lamb every day in the Beis Hamikdash, and that's the time. True, you could have a mincha earlier also. It's called mincha gdoila, and that is from 12:30, meaning 6.5 hours. If the day starts at 6, it's 12:30. In the winter, of course, it will be different. In the summer, maybe a little later. Could be sometimes 1, could be 1:15, could be before 12:30. But again, if the day started at 6, 6.5 hours is 12:30. Mincha ktana is 9.5 hours. How much is left after mincha ktana till sunset? So 3:30, so 4:30, 5:36, 2.5 hours. That's the time between mincha and sunset. What's half of 2.5 hours? An hour and a quarter. That's called plag ha-mincha. When you take the time left over from mincha till sunset and you split it in half, that's called plag ha-mincha. A half of the time between mincha and sunset. Plag ha-mincha. In other words, an hour and a quarter. If the day started at 6 and ends at 6, it would be an hour and 15 minutes. Because a quarter of an hour would be 50 minutes, because it's an hour of 60 minutes. So according to Rabbi Yehuda, till when could you daven mincha? Till plag ha-mincha, meaning you deduct, you minus from sunset an hour and 15 minutes, and that becomes your limit for mincha. So till when could you daven mincha according to Rabbi Yehuda? Would be till 4:45 p.m., again in these perfect days and nights. Once 4:45 p.m. comes, even though it's light outside, you cannot daven mincha according to Rabbi Yehuda. It's night, now is the time for Maariv. Mincha is only till plag 4:45, or again, whatever the measurement would be. However, once that time finishes, plag is over, now starts the time for Maariv, and Maariv continues throughout the evening. The Chachamim disagree. They say that's not true. Mincha goes till sunset, till night, which would mean till 6 p.m., and then after that, once night comes, Maariv begins. That's the big argument between Rabbi Yehuda and the Chacham. And it's one of the interesting arguments upon which the Gemara says we do not have a halacha. There's no verdict that has been embraced by the Chazal, by the Sanhedrin, and therefore, as we will see, actually people could make their own permanent choices. That's introduction number 1. Introduction number 2. The next piece, Brachas Daf Chavav Amud Aleph Gemara. Tanya Kavasei Reb Yossi Reb Chanina. We have a brayso supporting Reb Yossi Reb Chanina who holds that the tefillos were instituted by the patriarchs, by the Avos. Avram tikkun tefillas Shacharis. Avram instituted Shacharis. Shenemar. The pasuk says, "Vayashkem Avram ba'boker el hamokim asher amad sham." Amad. He woke up in the morning to the place where he stood. Standing is a form of prayer. Amida is tefillah. Avram gives us the morning davening. Yitzchak tikkun tefillas mincha shenemar vayetzi Yitzchak lasuach basada lifnei erev. Yitzchak went to meditate in the field before evening. He gave us the gift of mincha. Yaakov tikkun tefillas arvis shenemar vayivga ba'mokim vayolam sham ve'imgia el tefillah. Yaakov encountered the place. Encountered means davened, and he dwelled there. This was nighttime. Yaakov gave us the gift of Maariv. That's the view of Rabbi Yossi Reb Chanina. Tanya Kavasei Rabbi Yehusha ben Levi. We have another brayso supporting Rabbi Yehusha ben Levi. Ma amru tefillas hashachar ad chatzos. Why is the morning prayer only till midday? Sharei tamid shel shachar karev v'oilach ad chatzos. Because the morning lamb, the morning carbon tamid every day in the Beis Hamikdash, they would offer it right in the morning, but they can offer it till midday. Because the afternoon sacrifice of the lamb they could offer again till evening, till night. They did it earlier, but they could do it till night. And why could Maariv go throughout the night? Because there were limbs and fat of various animals that were sacrificed throughout the day, and sometimes there were too many to be consumed on the altar during the day, so they used to put them onto the altar. Throughout the night they would be consumed, and that's what Maariv is. So we have here a famous argument in the Gemara why we daven 3 times a day. Reb Yossi and Reb Chanina believes the Avos gave us the 3 prayers: Avraham, Shachris, Yitzchak, Mincha, Yaakov, Maariv. Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi says no, it's not connected to the Avos. The Chachamim instituted as a memory, as a commemoration for the Karbanas daily. Every day there were 2 lambs that were offered in the morning and in the afternoon. That's Shachris and Mincha. Why is there Maariv? Maariv is because there was the left often, or sometimes there were leftover limbs and organs and fat from previous karbanas that didn't manage to be burnt up on the altar, and they had the permission to put them there throughout the night, and they would burn. That's why we daven Maariv after nightfall. That is what the Gemara tells us in Brachas Daf Chavav, actually Daf Chavav Amud Beis. I see the sources here twice. Okay, so it's a mistake. It's the same source like the next one, Brachas Daf Chavav Amud Beis. We'll fix it. Now come to Tosfos. Frek Tosfos, remember the Gemara in Chulin? Remember this Gemara in Brachas? Remember the argument between Rabbi Yehuda and the Chachamim? Comes Tosfos on this Gemara, where it says that Yaakov gave us Maariv. How do we know Yaakov gave us Maariv? Because it says, Vayifga b'mokai. He encountered the space, and that means he davened there. And that was the tefillah of Maariv. It wasn't in the morning, it wasn't in the afternoon, it was in the evening. Tema Frek Tosfos, the next source. The Amar b'Peirid Gid Hanoshim. The Gemara says in Chulin, Vayelech Harana, Yaakov went to Kimati Lecharon. When he came to Charan, Boy Lamed, that he wanted to go back. Omar, he said, Efsher Shavarti b'Mokim, how can I pass the place where my father's davened? So Yaakov went back, and he davened. Which tefillah did he daven? We're assuming the Gemara tells us Maariv. He davened. What happens after that? He wants to go back on the way. He wants to go back to Charan. Hashem says, the tzaddik came to my hotel, and I'm not going to have him sleep over. Miyad, kivo Hashem, the sun set. So when did he daven Maariv? Before sunset or after sunset? Obviously before sunset. If he davened after sunset, the whole story doesn't make sense. You wouldn't need the sun to set. He came back, it was night, he davened Maariv. Clearly then, the first Maariv of history, which is the basis of all the Maarivs, happened during the daytime. That's what Tosfos says. Alma dehasim muchach dispalel arvis biyoyin. He davened Maariv by day. Me'achar she'ispalel kvar. It says he davened v'avadai to lemeder, and he wanted to go back on the road. And Hashem said, I want you to stay, and therefore the sun set. And this was after his davening. And that's what it says in the pasuk. Vayivga b'mokan. And then vayolan sham, why kivo hashemesh, after the davening, as the Gemara explains. It's not that the sun set before. It happened dafka after he davened. So we have here a problem. V'kasha must listen to Pedekama, the Omar she'ena is man tefillah tzesakechavim. This is a major contradiction to the view of the Chachamim and the Mishnah, who said that it's not as man tefillah. Mincha goes till nightfall, and Maariv begins after the stars come out, which means after nightfall. And now you tell me Yaakov was mesaken tefillas arfis, and that's why we do Maariv, when Yaakov's Maariv was during the day. Well, the fima shepirashnu the kaimelon Reb Yehuda, the Amar at plaga mincha nicha. If we hold that the halach is like Reb Yehuda, that mincha is till plag and then starts Maariv, it's wonderful. Maariv, you daven by day, you don't daven Maariv at night. You'll come here today at plag, you'll see it's light outside, it's wonderful. It's hard to understand why they're saying Amariv Haravim, but that's what a plag Maariv looks like. It's during daytime. V'yafa minik shalanu. Our custom to daven Maariv during the day is good. The Adarab, the toivlis palamuboy dionitzas. It's even better. The Chachamim's Maariv is a complicated Maariv. It doesn't belong at night. A Maariv by day is much better. That was Yaakov's Maariv, and Yaakov is the author of Maariv. Tosfos supports the custom of those who daven Maariv early. But the problem is still the problem. Tosfos doesn't address the real problem in terms of the Chachamim. Rabbi Yehuda, it's a great support for Rabbi Yehuda. Gewaldige raya for Rabbi Yehuda. The first might have happened by day. It's a clear Gemara in Chulin. Hard to argue with this. But according to the Chachamim, you have to understand, why did they make the time of Maariv, if you say Yaakov was Besak and Tfilas Maariv, in the time that Yaakov didn't even do Maariv? And if I want to daven Maariv when Yaakov daven Maariv, I don't fulfill the mitzvah. I have to do another Maariv. I didn't do Maariv. It's like you daven Shachas in the middle of the night. You daven Maariv at 4:45 p.m., you didn't daven Maariv. It's a time of Mincha, according to the Chacham. The original Maariv, you're not allowed to do that. You can't replicate. The truth is that even according to Rabbi Yehuda, there's a problem. Tosfos doesn't mention it, but there's a real problem according to Rabbi Yehuda. Because if you look at Medrash Rabbah, on the Parsha Vayetze, it says Kivo HaShemesh 2 hours before the regular time. Shtei shois before the regular time of Shkiyas Achama. That means Yaakov daven Maariv more than 2 hours before sunset. According to Rabbi Yehuda, that also wouldn't work. According to Rabbi Yehuda, you could daven Maariv by plag. Plag is 1 hour and 15 minutes, 1 hour and a quarter. Not more than 2 hours. And he davened Maariv before the sunset, which happened 2 hours before, and the sunset happened after Maariv when he was about to leave. That means he davened Maariv 2.5, or maybe 3, or 2 and something hours before sunset. Even according to Rabbi Yehuda, it doesn't work. Rabbi Yehuda would also not kasher such a Maariv. That means if we try to daven Maariv in the time that the original author of Maariv davened, it wouldn't work. Let's raise another issue. And that is, why did the Chachamim institute Maariv, either Rabbi Yaakov, or the second reason was because at night they used to burn up the limbs and organs that didn't get consumed during the day. Take a look at the next source, Gemara in Psachim Samaches Amud Beis. Tanya, Amar Reb Shimon said, Bo yirei kama chaviva mitzvah b'shaita. Look how wonderful, how beloved it is to do a mitzvah in the time of the mitzvah. Why? It comes Shabbos. To burn something up in a fire on Shabbos is a malach. It's biblically prohibited. Shabbos, they were makriv a carbon Talmud in the morning and in the afternoon. Should they now take the meat and put it into the fire and have it burnt up, which is a violation of Shabbos? You say the Torah wants you to bring the carbon, just like you're allowed to shechten on Shabbos. You're also not allowed to shechten. The Torah says, b'mayadai, even on Shabbos, the famous Gemara in Psachim. But do I have to take the meat and put it on the Mizbeach? Why don't you just wait till nighttime, Mitzvah Shabbos? You could do it the whole night. Wait till Mitzvah Shabbos, say, Baruch Hamav, make Havdalah, and then put it on the Mizbeach. We don't do that. Everything was burnt on Shabbos. Why? So the Shimon says, Chaviva mitzvah b'shaita. Because to do a mitzvah in its time is so precious that it overrides even Shabbos. If it's a mitzvah on Shabbos, of course. Even though this part of the mitzvah you could do at night. The shechting and the sprinkling of the blood you have to do by day. But this part of the mitzvah you could do at night. So do it at night. Why do you have to violate Shabbos? Chaviva mitzvah b'shaita. To do a mitzvah in the right time is very precious, is very beloved. Don't delay for tonight what you could do today. Some people's philosophy is whatever you could do tomorrow, don't do today. But when it comes to a mitzvah, chaviv mitzvah b'shaita. This means that burning the limbs and the organs at night is only b'diavad. Meaning, if you didn't have time, if the mizbeach was too packed, if you forgot, you do it at night. But that's not the way to do it. Even on Shabbos, where there's a reason to push it off, don't push it off. Chaviv mitzvah b'shaita. If this is the case, we have a very fascinating thing. According to the Chachamim, that the time of Maariv is at night. And Maariv was instituted keneged a varim ubdarim that weren't burned during the day and were burnt at night. It means that Maariv was instituted for something that really should have not been. Because chaviva mitzvah b'shaita. It's much better if you do it during the day. So you might say that's the reason. We have a famous argument of tfilas Maariv is mitzvah or rishus, as we'll soon see. Some of the Chachamim held Maariv was obligatory, like Shachris and Mincha. Others said no, it was a choice, it was voluntary. This would make sense. Why would it be voluntary? Because it's not something that was obligated to do every day. The carbon Talmud in the morning and the afternoon, rain and shine, you had to bring it. The Evarim and B'darim at night was only if you didn't manage to do it during the day. So sometimes yeah, sometimes not. So we could understand why Tfilas Arvis is Rishus. But the view of Rabban Gamliel, we're soon going to see in Brachas, Chav Zayin, is that Arvis is Chayv, it's an obligation. So I'm obligated to daven Maariv every night to commemorate what? To commemorate something that you're actually not supposed to do. It's much better to do it during the day. So we're obligating a Jew to daven a third tefillah to do something which you only do second. It's the best, second best to the. It's a second alternative, which is not the best alternative. The real mitzvah should have been done during the day. You should have never reached this point where you did it at night. But whatever happened, so every night you have to do. There's a chayva, an obligation, to do a tefillah for something that it would have been better not to do. It's a strange phenomenon. Once again, the Rabbi Yehusha actually writes, it's a chiddush, that the view who holds tefillah's arvis chayva holds that the tefillahs were nistaken by the ovis. So there's no reason to distinguish between Maariv and Shachris and Mincha. Why is Yaakov any inferior to Avram and Yitzchak? That's what the Rabbi Yehusha says. The view that says tefillah's arvis rishus holds that it was niskan keneged the karbonis. And that's why the Evarim Ubdarim works, because the Evarim Ubdarim is only rishus, it's not chayva. Yet it seems still a little difficult, because that distinction is a great novelty to say that Rabban Gamliel doesn't hold that it was keneged the Talmud Shel Shachar Bein Harbayim and the Evarim Ubdarim of the night. So that's another issue we want to address. Now, what is the halacha? Is the halacha like Rabbi Yehuda, the halacha like the Chachamim? So the Gemara tells us, takes a look at the next source, Brachas Chav Zayin Amid Beis. Hashta de lo yitmar hilchas lo kamar v'lo kamar. Now we don't have a halacha. We never learned the halacha. Is it like Rabbi Yehuda, like the Chachamim? The avad kamar avad, the avad kamar avad. If you do it like one master, it's good. And if you do it like the other master, it's good. So the Gemara tells us clearly, there was no verdict. If you daven mincha like him, good. If you daven mincha like him or Maariv like him, it's good. What does this mean practically? So let's see Shulchan Aruch, Eirach Chaim, Siman, Reish, Lamed, Gimel, the Mechaber, the author of the Shulchan Aruch, Reb Yosef Karo. Misha Yispalot Tfilas Mincha Lach Avav Shoyes Omechza Lamayla Yotza. If you daven mincha after 6.5 hours, around 12:30, you're Yotza. The Iker Zman and Mitesh Shoyes Omechza Lamayla Ad Halayla L'Rabban. The main time of mincha is after 9.5 hours till nightfall, according to the rabbis. Va'asikna, we conclude, the Avad Kamar Avad or the Avad Kamar Avad. You could follow either view. But here is a condition that many people should at least know, although there's a lot of discussion about it. You have to permanently choose your path. You could do whatever you want, but you got to choose which one you want to go. If you follow Rabbana, and you daven mincha ad halayla till night, if I'm davening mincha till night, in other words, I'm following the Rabbanon, no problem. But now I can't start davening Maariv from Plaga Mincha. If you're following Reb Yehuda, and you're davening Maariv from Plag, in other words, if you're embracing Reb Yehuda, embrace Reb Yehuda. If you're embracing Rabbanon, embrace Rabbanon. You can't embrace both because it's what we call shnei kulas asayis, two leniencies that undermine each other. Because according to Reb Yehuda, if you're going to start davening mincha later, you'll daven mincha after sunset, and then you'll finish mincha, you'll do Maariv. Reb Yehuda says, 1 second, either your Maariv doesn't work or your mincha doesn't work. You want your Maariv to work because you're following me, but then your mincha didn't work. Your mincha had a deadline, sunset. If you want to follow the Rabbanon and therefore you're going to daven mincha all the way till sunset, however, you want to daven Maariv earlier, that's not a problem. You can daven mincha after sunset. And then you want to daven Maariv earlier, the Rabbanon say you have to choose one path, either the Yehuda or the Rabban. Now that people have accustomed to daven mincha till night, they should never daven Maariv before sunset, because the Rabbanon would say this is really not going to work. But what happens? You daven an early Maariv after Plaga Mincha, even though you follow the Rabbanon because you daven Mincha sometimes till sunset, you did it. Even though usually you follow the Rabbanon, if it's a time of tchak, a time of distress, you won't be able to daven later. Some say you won't be able to find a minyan later. Some say it's difficult to find a minyan. That's already a big discussion. You could daven Maariv from Plag HaMincha, even though you follow the Rabbanon. Now there is a big, of course, discussion about today. You see today, many people come to shul, they daven a Plag, but do they do it consistently every single day of the year? It would seem to contradict the Shulchan Aruch. So do we call today B'Shas HaTchak If the fact you want to go home early and you don't want to come back for a later minyan for Maariv, is that called b'shas adchak or not? Okay, so you can talk to your local Orthodox rabbi and find out what is the right thing for you to do in terms of davening Maariv before sunset, even though you don't do this 365 days a year. You certainly sometimes rely on the Rabbanan to daven a later mincha. This is, of course, not connected to the second question of when shkia is, when sunset is. As you know, that itself is a question. In other words, what is sunset? There's two different sunsets, but that's a whole different question that would go according to both views. When you say mincha is till shkia, what does shkia mean? Is it the early sunset or the later sunset? That's a whole separate creature, but the bottom line is, the halacha is not like either. You can choose your path. Next source, Shulchan Aruch Harav Orach Chaim Siman Reish Samach Zayin Seif Beis. The Shulchan Aruch of the Balatanya in Hilchos Shabbos, quoting the earlier poskim, including the Tur and the Shulchan Aruch, and explaining. Even people who daven Maariv in the right time all weekdays. What's the right time of Maariv? Bismana, he means after Tzeisak Chavim, after the stars come out, after nightfall. Friday, you don't have to be consistent. Friday, you could be inconsistent. You could daven Maariv, Kabbalah Shabbos, after Plag HaMincha, and even Maariv. Kedivrei Reb Yehuda sha'emer shemeplag HaMincha ve'elechu layla li'yin tefillah. You can follow Reb Yehuda. Sunday through Thursday, you're davening Maariv after nightfall, and you're davening Mincha till sunset. So suddenly Friday, how could you become a hypocrite? According to the Shulchan Aruch, who says you have to define your path. And we're not talking about b'shas adchak, b'di'evet. Answers the Balatanya. V'av shilipa'amim b'shar yomim mispalol mincha b'zman ha'hu. V'arein shtei kulas ha'soyis v'zu v'zu k'mar shekasa b'simen reish lamed gimel. Even though Thursday you may have davened mincha that time, right before sunset, after plag, how could you now do Maariv? You're contradicting yourself. If it's a time of Maariv, it's not a time of mincha. Ein chosheshim lozeh b'tfilas arvis shel Shabbos. Most of the poskim, including the Torah and the Shulchan Aruch, say when it comes to Maariv of Shabbos, we allow you to do this. Why? Because there's something special about davening Maariv Shabbos early Friday night. To add from the weekday to the holy. One thing we don't allow is that on Friday you should daven mincha after plag and then Maariv after plag. Mainly Thursday and Friday is a halbatzara. At least you're not contradicting yourself in the same time when you want to daven the two tefillahs, the same day. This was yesterday, this is today. But if you're going to daven Friday night after plag, mincha, and then you're going to daven Maariv before sunset, this is already not allowed. So if you're davening an early Maariv Friday evening, you have to make sure that mincha is finished before plag hamincha. And this is the halacha, as it said, explained, raised by both poskim. Shulchan Aruch Harav explains it in detail. So now we have a fascinating conclusion. This is something that the halacha was never decided on. And therefore, the Ovid Kamarav, the Ovid Kamarav, you could follow Rabbi Yehuda, you could follow the Chacham, you could follow both paths. It's not a problem. However, Shabbos, we say that you could follow easily the path of Rabbi Yehuda, not regarding what you do usually during the week. Why is it, Taka? That the way it got set up in history is that when it comes to a regular Maariv and a regular Mincha, we embrace both shittas. No one shitta has been decided lahalach. And that's till today. Every day, Yireim Ushleimim follow Rabbi Yehuda, and Yireim Ushleimim, fine, holy, wonderful Jews, follow the Chacham. Shabbos, we embrace the view of Rabbi Yehuda much more, and we say you could go according to Rabbi Yehuda, even though yesterday you went according to the Chacham. Shabbos agrees with Rabbi Yehuda. So the Shulchan Aruch Harav says, because it's Chayla LaKodesh. But Chayla LaKodesh has to do with adding to Shabbos during the weekday. Why did that have to change it even when it comes to the din of Maariv, which l'chayda has to do with night, Asher b'dvarei Maariv haravim? Here too we follow Reb Yehuda. So let's change the subject completely and learn a story together in Gemara. It's one of those long and very complicated and really deeply strange stories on many levels. So Gemara in Brachas, Daf Chav Zayin, the same period that speaks about Mincha and Maariv, it gets in through Maariv, discussion through Maariv, but it goes on to a whole other topic. What's up the Gemara? Brachas Chav Zayin Amid Beis. Tfilas Arvis, Rabban Gamliel Oimer Chayver, Reb Yehoshua Oimer Rishus. Maariv, Rabban Gamliel says is an obligation, Reb Yehoshua says is voluntary. Amar Abaye halacha k'divrei Oimer Chayver, Rav Amar halacha k'divrei Oimer Rishus. Abaye says halacha is like Rabban Gamliel. Rav said, I'm sorry, halacha is like Rabbi Yehusha. Maariv is voluntary. Tanu Rabbanon, the rabbis taught. Ma'aseh b'talmud echad shaval lefnei Rabbi Yehusha. A student came before Rabbi Yehusha. Amar lo tfilas arvis rishus chayva. Is Maariv obligatory or voluntary? Amar le, Rabbi Yehusha says, my opinion, rishus. But lefnei Rabbi Gamliel. He comes to the right person. He comes to Rabbi Gamliel. Amar lo tfilas arvis rishus chayva. Amar le chayva. It's an obligation. Amar lo, he tells him, I don't understand about Rabbi Yehusha. Amar le rishus. Your colleague Rabbi Yehusha told me it's voluntary. How do you, Rabbi Gamliel, tell me it's an obligation? Rabbi Gamliel says, you know what? Wait till the Torah scholars come into the Beis Medrash. And let's see. All the Talmud Chachamim come into the Beis Medrash. The questioner gets up and says, I have a question, rabbis. Maariv, voluntary or obligatory? Rabbi Gamliel says, Chayva, this isn't public, it's an obligation. Rabbi Gamliel, is there anybody who argues with me about this publicly? Rabbi Yehusha, from all people, Rabbi Yehusha speaks up and says, Lav, nobody argues with me. Rabbi Gamliel says, in your name, they told me earlier that you said it's voluntary. You! How can you come and say that nobody argues with me? Amar le, Reb Gamliel continues as Yehoshua. Amoid al raglecha v'ya'idu bach. Stand up on your feet and let everybody testify against you. Amar Rabbi Yehusha al Yaklov. Rabbi Yehusha stood up on his feet. V'amar, and he said, listen to his words. Ilmole ani chai v'hu meis. If I was alive and he was dead, a dead man has no problem denying, a live man has no problem denying what a dead man said. Not a problem. But now that I am alive and he's alive, how could the living deny the living? No, Rabbi Yehuda was saying, Rabbi Yehusha was saying, I have a big problem here. If the questioner was dead and I was alive, I wouldn't have an issue. I would say he made up the story. But now that I'm alive and he's alive, everybody's alive, I can't deny it. That's his response. Rabbi Gamliel is standing, Rabbi Gamliel is sitting and lecturing, and Rabbi Yehusha is standing. He told to stand. Until the crowd started to revolt. And they told the translator, the one who was explaining the drasha, Amoid, stop. He stopped. They said, how long are we going to allow Rabban Gamliel to embarrass and degrade the dignity of Rabbi Yehusha? And as the Gemara continues, they said this is the third time it happened already. It happened once on Ma'aseh B'chayris. It happened another time with Kiddush HaChodesh. They had an argument when Yom Kippur is, and Gamliel forced Rabbi Yehusha to come on his own Yom Kippur with a stick and his wallet with money on his Yom Kippur because Rabbi Gamliel didn't feel it was Yom Kippur. This is the third time. This can't be anymore. What do? They dethrone Rabbi Gamliel. Now understand what we call by us impeachment. They take Rabbi Gamliel, they remove him from his throne. This is the highest position among Klal Yisrael. It's not a political position, it's a spiritual position. It's the head of the Sanhedrin, as I said, the leader of the main body, the legislative body, the spiritual body that decides all of the major issues halachically and spiritually that confront the Jewish people. Rabbi Gamliel is the leader, and understand why he was the leader. His father was the Nasi. His father was Reb Shimon ben Gamliel. And his father was executed by the Romans. Reb Shimon ben Gamliel is one of the Asara Arugei Malchus. His father was killed. Reb Gamliel is the Nasi, his son. His father His father's father was also the Nasi. He was named after him, Rabban Gamliel Azake, who comes from the family of Hillel, the son of Reb Shimon, the son of Hillel. So you have this is the family of royalty. And of course, this is the family of Beis David. This is the family that traces its lineage to David HaMelech. It's the family of royalty, of leadership among the Jewish people. In fact, when Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai speaks to Vespasian, the Roman emperor, one of the three things he asks for is, do not destroy Shushilta the Rabban Gamliel, the dynasty of Rabban Gamliel. Don't destroy that family, the family of the house of David HaMelech, the family of Jewish royalty, the family from which Mashiach comes, from the house of David. So Rabban Gamliel was the leader from the house of Hillel. They were for more than 100 years the Nasi, but they dethroned him at this moment because Rabbi Yehusha was being embarrassed. So now you need a new Nasi. Who do you put up? They brought a few names up, it didn't work. Nukmelu Rebbe Elazar ben Azariah. Let's put up Rebbe Elazar ben Azariah. Rebbe Elazar ben Azariah was a Kohen. Rebbe Elazar ben Azariah was extremely wealthy. Elazar ben Azariah was one of the greatest sages of the time. Let's put him up. Amrulay, they came to him. Nichalei lamar d'leveresh mesifta. You want to be the Rosh Hashiva? Amar lahu. What does Rebbe Elazar say? Izil ve'imlich bin shabesi. This I have to ask my better wife, my better half. My better half. This I don't decide myself. You ask your wife. Azal ve'imlich b'dvisu. You want to ask his wife. You know what the wife says, right? It's exactly the last thing she needs. She barely saw her husband. B'chlal, now forget about it. Amrulay, she tells him, Dilma ma'avrin loch. Aklugavai, they put you up, they can take you down also. Look what they did to Rabban Gamliel. When they'll put you up, they'll take you down. What do you need it for? Amar lo, he tells her, you know, you live life once, you gotta seize the moment. One day use a beautiful, precious cup of wine, tomorrow it's gonna break. Seize the moment. Carpe diem. Tomorrow it'll break. They'll remove me tomorrow. You don't forfeit such an opportunity. It's a good philosophy in life. Amrulay, she tells him, here you see, Vaiter, Aklugavai, bless lachiyurta. The problem is, let's face it, you're a baby. You got no experience, no white hair. You have no experience of life. He was 18 years old. Rebbe Elazar was 18 years old. You're going to become the leader of Gamliel. Was seasoned in Gamliel, was experienced. You're an 18-year-old boy. It's what husbands love hearing from their wives, no? There's a miracle that night. 18 rows of hair in his beard become white. Okay? Shone? I knew the Kamer Rebbe Elazar ben Azariah. That's why Rebbe Elazar ben Azariah says that famous statement with which we begin the Haggadah. Harei ani ki ben shivim shana v'loy ben shivim shana. I look like I'm 70 years old. I'm really 18 years old. I look like I'm 17 because of the hair turning white. And what does he say? Harei ani ki ben shivim shana v'loy zachisi shetei amer yitzias mitzrayim b'leila sachadar shubim. I never heard a good source why there's a mitzvah to mention Yitzias Mitzrayim at night. Until Ben Zoyim explained it to me, it says, L'man tiskis yom tzeis chemeretz Mitzrayim, kol yemei chayecha. What's kol yemei chayecha? Yemei chayecha, the days, kol yemei chayecha, every night you have to mention Yitzias Mitzrayim, which is what we do. Chachamim say, kol is lahavi l'maisa Mashiach. Even when Mashiach comes, we'll still mention Yitzias Mitzrayim. This was all said the day when he looks like he's 70 years old. Keven Shivim Shana. Next. The first thing Rebbe Elazar ben Azariah did is he threw away the bodyguard. There was a custodian, a shomer by the door of the Beis Medrash. He sent him away, and he opened the door. He let all the students come in. There was no selection process. You go in, you don't come in, you're good, you're not. Everyone comes in. Rabban Gamliel had a philosophy. He used to say, "Kol Talmud shein toichen kebarei yikanos l'beis hamedrash." Any student who's inside is not like his outside. Can't enter into the Beis Medrash. Rabban Gamliel wanted holistic people. If your inner self and your outer self are inconsistent with each other, you don't belong in the yeshiva. Rebbe Elazar ben Azariah said that policy is over. Whoever wants to come in, comes in. What happens? They had to bring in a lot of new benches into the Beis Medrash. Reb Yochanan pligi ba'Abba Yosef ben Dustoi v'Rabbanon. How many? We have to argue about everything. So there's an argument how many. One view is 400 new benches. One view is 700 new benches that day in the Beis Medrash because of the amount of students that made their way in after Rebbe Elazar ben Azariah opened the door. I was once sitting at a lecture, so somebody was invited to speak, and when he got up, the whole place emptied out. So he says, now I understand what the Gemara says in Brachas. That day there were many new benches. Sure said that day there were many new students. The pshat is that they invited a speaker like me to get up, and suddenly there were many new benches in the Beis Medrash, which was not bad for the moment, right? He probably heard it from somebody else who had the same experience. Now Rabban Gamliel was a great man. He sees what's happening. He sees there's 700 new students in Beis Medrash. He expelled them all. He feels horrible. Look what he did. A whole generation he denied from the Beis Medrash. Amar dilmechas v'shalom manati Torah miYisrael. I prevented Torah from being taught to the Jewish people because I locked the doors. My standards were too elevated. Achazulei b'chelm. That night he had a dream. What did he see in the dream? Chatz bechivri demalion kitma. White pitchers filled with ashes. Meaning on the outside it looks beautiful. On the inside it's nothing worth. So he feels better. He feels better. It looks good. You know, it's a packed yeshiva. There's nothing happening. It's white pitchers filled with ashes. Nothing happening. Zog the Gemara, Velohi. The dream was not true. Hashem arranged the dream just to make him calm. He felt bad for him. He wanted to relax him, but it was wrong. He didn't want Rabban Gamliel should kill himself over guilt for what he did. So he showed him a dream. Don't get so excited about the yeshiva. It's white pitchers filled with ashes. The substance is nothing significant. It's ashes. But the Gemara says, Wallahi, it's not true. This was a dream just to appease Rabban Gamliel because of his spiritual greatness. And the Gemara continues a whole discussion. It's almost a whole Amid, Brachas, Daf Chav Ches, Chav Zayin, Beis Chav Tes Amid Aleph, all the discussions they had in the Beis Medrash, the debates, the issues, the people who were converted, people that their Judaism was questioned that day, and Rabbi Yehusha was winning the debate. After the whole discussion, Amar Rabban Gamliel, Hoyil v'hachi hava. I see what's happening. Ezel v'afaisil Rabbi Yehusha. Let me go ask forgiveness from Rabbi Yehusha. The intellectual and moral integrity of the Chachamim that you see throughout Shas is incredibly powerful. They had disagreements, very, very strong. The moment they realized or they felt they were wrong, they immediately retracted. He says, I see, I made a mistake, let me go appease Rabbi Yehusha. Kimata Lebesi comes to his house. Chazinu la shisa de besi de mashkara. He sees the walls are black. Amar le, he says to Rabbi Yehusha, Mikoisle beischa atanikar shepechamiyata. I look at the walls of your house, obviously you're a smith. Or as Rashi says, you deal with charcoal. And that's why the walls are black. Amar le, Rabbi Yehusha says, Oy loy l'doyer sha'ata parnasa. Woe to a generation that you are its leader. You know not the pain of Talmud Chachamim, Bamei, Misparnisim, how they make a living, Bamei, Nizoinim, how they nurture their families. You don't know. You have to come to my house to figure out how hard I work to earn a living, and look what a living it is. Woe to a generation that you are its leader. Amalai, Rabbi Gamliel says, Na'nesimach. I agree with you. I concede to you. Mechoili, forgive me. He didn't respond. So Gamliel says, do it for the honor of my father, who was killed, who was murdered, pious. He appeased. He forgave him. Amri, they said, hey Chenavit. What do we do now? Rabbi Gamliel really should be restored. He asked forgiveness. Yeshua forgave him. So he should be brought back. Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah should be dethroned. But Navre, if we remove him, Gemiri Mailim B'Kodesh Ve'Meridin, you elevate people in holiness, you don't bring them down. You made Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah a Nasi. You can't dethrone. Nidrish Mar Chodesh Shapsa, Asili Kenuya. If we'll split up the position, he'll speak one Shabbos, another Shabbos will create rivalry, jealousy. Ella Lidrish Rabban Gamliel Kloser Shapsi, Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah Chodesh Shapsa. Let Rabban Gamliel give the shir 3 Shabbos and Rabbi ben Azariah 1. So it won't be 1 and 1, it won't be 2 and 2, it will be 3 and 1. V'hainu da'amar mar Shabbos shel mi hoisa shel Rabbi ben Azariah hoisa. That's what we have in Gemara in different places. They asked, whose Shabbos was it? Meaning, who's the one who gave the speech? Was it Reb Gamliel? They said, no, it was Rabbi ben Azariah. Shabbos shel mi, whose Shabbos was it? And now the Gemara finishes the story. And by the way, the Yosei Talmud, that student, who was the one who made this whole revolution, the one who came to Rabbi Yehusha, you remember, and said, Tfilas Harvest Rishus. And he said Rishus. He went to Rabbi Gamliel and said Chayv. He said, but Rabbi Yehusha said Rishus. Said, let's go to the Beis Medrash. And he made the whole turnaround, the whole revolution. You should know he had a name. He was not anonymous. What's his name? Reb Shimon ben Yochai. This was Reb Shimon ben Yochai. That's how the Gemara finishes the whole story and moves on to the next subject. In the beginning it tells us, at the end you should know. Now I'll tell you his name. Reb Shimon ben Yochai. Now when you read this story, it's very obvious that the story is so filled with mystery, with difficulty. What happened? The first question is, how could Rabbi Yehusha speak untruth? Rabbi Gamliel asked, does anybody disagree with me? So if he was quiet, okay. He wasn't quiet. He said no. A few minutes ago or a few hours ago, you disagreed with him. How do you say no? That's number one. Number two, why don't you tell us it was Reb Shimon ben Yochai in the beginning? Naturally, you don't want to, this didn't bring such nice results. So you don't want to mention a name because it's like it's a disgraceful thing. And at the end, suddenly, Reb Shimon ben Yochai's name is mentioned. The next question is the poetry Rabbi Yehusha employs when he was caught by what happened. Yeah. If I told you something, and then I deny it publicly, and then it's proven that I lied, what's the proper thing to do? You get up and you say, I said a lie, I said untruth, and you give an excuse. You don't give an excuse, you apologize. Rabbi Yehusha says, if I was alive and he was dead, it would have worked. But now that he's alive and I'm alive, the living can't deny. What is this, poetry? What is this, a concert? Was this a niggin? The guy said, Reb Gamliel said, what are you saying untruth? He said, you said philosophers and truth. Strange response. But since I'm alive, he's alive, we're all alive, I'm stuck. Thank you. He could have said it much shorter. Of course, he didn't say I lied. I'm sorry. Because why would he lie? So there's something else going on here. So he really felt that there was nobody arguing with Rabban Gamliel. But he just argued with Rabban Gamliel. So what's happening here? And the only response is, I'm alive, he's alive, the living can't deny the living. It's a whole beautiful poem. That's also very difficult. Next question. He comes to his wife and he says, Rebbetzin, you want to be a Rebbetzin or not? She says, it's fine, you can stay a simple person. The way she says it is, you don't have white hair. It's about white hair. It's about experience. White hair is a symbol. It's not about white hair. If a person is born with white hair, it helps. It's what white hair represents. Mashallah yasa hasechel, as they say in Hebrew, yasa hasman, right? Aristotle asked his students, who is the greatest teacher who kills all of his students? And the answer was time. But if that's the case, what was the point of the miracle of the white hair? If Rabbi ben Azariah had the wisdom, had the experience, had the know-how, great. He has white hair, he doesn't have white hair. If he doesn't have it, he doesn't have it. What do we need the white hair? To go to the pictures in the magazines. It's not nice if you appoint Rabbi ben Azariah, he doesn't have a long white beard. That's the issue. So you might say, the point was that the miracle showed that heaven agreed that he's the right man, even though he's young and he doesn't have the experience. But then why the white hair? And also, how does that miracle give him the experience of his 18 years old? And then we have the bigger question. How could Reb Shimon ben Yochai, who we think is a student at this point, create such conflict? What you call in Hebrew, mechar cheriv. Literally to create conflict. First he goes to Rabbi Yehusha, to ask a shaila. Imagine, you have a question, you go to one Rav, then you go to a person you know is his opponent, you run to him, and then he tells you something, he says, but he said this, and then you do it publicly. Why are you doing this? Rabbi Yehusha has his view, Gamliel has his view. The first time Rav Shimon bar Yochai heard that there's a machlokes, the first time he couldn't believe there's an argument. It's the only thing they argued about. The whole Mishnah is, the whole culture of Talmud Bavli is one non-stop machlokes. They never stop arguing. Here he's running back and forth, and he's telling what he said, but he said. And then in the Beis Medrash he does it again. Why would he do this? And many more questions, but let's move on from here. So you remember all the pieces of the shir we were holding? We started off with the meat market, right? With all the questions about the meat market. And then from there we went to the question of Tosfos, on how could Yaakov was Mesaken Maariv, our Maariv is a wrong time of Maariv. And then we went to the question of Chaviva Mitzvah B'Shaita, if the time of Maariv is, if Maariv was instituted for the Evarim Ubdorim, it's not supposed to be done at night, it's supposed to be done by day. And then we went to the question of why the halacha was never established like anyone besides for Shabbos. And then we went to the story of Masechta Brachos with Rabbi Yehusha, Rabban Gamliel, and Rav Shimon bar Yochai. And probably my time is up, right? So we have one more source, and then we'll get to the answer, Be'ezer Hashem. I want to ask one more question that I'm thinking of, and that is, what was the svara between Rabbi Gamliel and Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah to open the Beis Medrash or not? They had to have a logical... Rabbi Gamliel was a leader, he was a serious person. Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah was a serious person. They had two different philosophies about what type of students to produce. What was behind his shitta, what was behind his shitta. The last source is Psachim Daf Peches. The Gemara says, My Diksiv, Pasuk in Yeshaya, about when Mashiach comes. Many nations will come, and they say, let's go up to the mountain of Hashem, to the house of the God of Yaakov. Elokei Yaakov, Elokei Avram v'Yitzchak. Suddenly, it's only the God of Yaakov, not Avram and Yitzchak. When Mashiach comes, they say, let's all go up to the Beis HaMikdash. Why is it called Beis Elokei Yaakov? It's the house of Hashem, of everybody, Avram and Yitzchak too. And for the Gemara, Loi Kavram shekasuv b'har shenemer ashayamer ayoim b'har Hashem yirah. V'loi ki Yitzchak shekasuv b'yishol shenemer v'yitzi Yitzchak l'suach b'sada. Ki Yaakov shekarei bayis shenemer v'yikra Hashem al-makam ahu Beis Keh. Avram called the Beis HaMikdash his mountain, the temple mount, Harabayis Har. Yitzchak called it a field. Vayetzi Yitzchak l'suach b'sada. Avram ashayamer ayoim b'har Hashem yirah. All the same place. Yaakov is the only one who calls it a home. It's not a mountain and it's not a field. It's a home. Vayikra Shem HaMokamahu Beis Keh. In the beginning of Vayetze, after this whole story with the davening and the sleeping and so forth. And that's why, when Mashiach comes and they go up to the Beis HaMikdash, they call it Beis Elokei Yaakov. This is the home of the God of Yaakov. It's the unique bias that Yaakov imagined, different than Avram and Yitzchak. So the Marsha, in his commentary on Gemara, Chidushei Agadas Amsachim Peches, explains the Gemara, that the three terms represent the three Batei Mikdash. Avram Avinu called it a mountain, he was referring to the first Beis HaMikdash. Yitzchak a field, the second Beis HaMikdash. Yaakov a home, the third Beis HaMikdash. The Alshich in Tehillim, Chav Dalet, says the same idea in the Gemara. It's three Geulos, three Batei Mikdash, the three Avos. This means Shacharis, Mincha, and Maariv, which Yaakov says, my father and grandfather davened here. And Yaakov davens Maariv right here in this place, which he's going to call bias, is also connected to Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, and also to the three Batei Mikdash. So Shacharis is connected to the first Beis HaMikdash. Mincha is an experience of the second Beis HaMikdash, Yitzchak Avinu. And Maariv is an experience of the third Beis HaMikdash, which is Yaakov Avinu not called har, not called sada, but called bayis. Which then would make it a little more strange that tfilas arvis, actually, according to Rava and most halachic authorities, is rishus. It's not an obligation. It's voluntary. But it would make sense if we understand that the Beis Hamikdash Hashlishi we don't have yet, and therefore it's not something that's you could call chayva. It's something of the future, and therefore there's an argument of tfilas arvis is chayva or rishus. But what does this really mean? Why would Maariv be connected the third Beis Hamikdash versus Shachris and Mincha? Maariv literally means from the word erev, night, darkness. Why would Maariv then be connected to the third Beis Hamikdash? You would think it would be connected to light, not to darkness. So it's explained in Svarim, especially in the writings of Kabbalah, and even more in the writings of Hasidus, that the two are actually very deeply connected. The greatest light in the world we often call darkness. Not because it's not bright, but because we don't have the tools to be able to grasp it. And whenever I don't have the tools to grasp something that's so much deeper than me, it translates in my life as darkness. To give a simple example, if somebody's sitting at a shiur, and there's a teacher who may be a brilliant genius and is sharing the most profound ideas, but it's not relatable to the audience, so they may all come out and you'll say, what was the shiur like? I don't know, I just have a migraine headache. It went, woo, confusing, I don't know what hit me. In the beginning I thought I understood something, now I know I understand nothing. That's not because it was too superficial, it's because it was too deep. And because something that's too deep, sometimes it challenges my kelim, my vessels. So either we dismiss it as insanity or stupidity because we don't want to deal with it, or it shakes us up. So sometimes when you look at the sunlight, it's blinding. Why is it blinding? Not because there's no light. It's too much light. My eyes are too sensitive for that intense light. I have to have a mechitza. I have to have a partition to separate me from sunlight because it's the only way I can deal with it. And that way, what is light for us is usually darkness. And what is darkness for us is usually light. Which is why in the bracha in the morning we say Yotzer Oir Uvoire Chayshach. What is higher? Yotzer or Voire? Voire is higher. The world of Bria precedes the world of Yetzirah. Creation comes before formation. Should have it not said Voire Oir V'Yotzer Chayshach. Darkness is inferior to light. Light means you have vision, you have clarity. Darkness, you have confusion. Why is darkness Boire and Oir is Yotzer? Even stronger, the Arizal. In the writings of the Arizal, there's a minig, and it's a minig in some communities, that when you say Yotzer Oir, you kiss, which tefillin? Tefillin shal yad. When you say Voire Chayshach, you kiss the tefillin shal rosh. The Gemara says in Menachos that the holiness of tefillin shal rosh is higher than tefillin shal yad. So Yotzer Oir should have been tefillin shal rosh. Chayshach is a lower level, it's tefillin shal yad. Arizal says no. Yotzer Oir is tefillin shal yad, Voire Chayshach is tefillin shal rosh. The answer is because there's two types of darkness. There's a darkness that's inferior to light, but there's another type of darkness. It's so much beyond my perception that I don't have a choice but to call it darkness, because it's confusing to me. It's difficult for me to comprehend. I can't wrap my brain around it. And therefore it becomes overwhelming. Often in life you hear something or you experience something, and because it's so true, it translates into darkness. It's too intense. It's too overwhelming. It doesn't settle in me easily. It doesn't brighten me up. It challenges me. Tefillin Sharosh is much higher than Tefillin Shayat. It's a higher Kedusha. Boire is a higher world. And when I look at that world, it's like I'm looking at the sun. I have to close my eyes. I can't deal with this light. This light is too dark for me. And that's why the Pasuk says, Yoshes Choshech Sisrei. The Pasuk in Eyev says, he places darkness as his hiding place. Yoshev, the Seiser Elyon, is Yoshes Choshech Sisrei. This is a Choshech that comes from a place that is deeper than Oir. Therefore, Tfilas Arvis, the Tfilah of nighttime, the Tfilah of darkness, is connected to Beis Hamikdash Hashlishi. Because the light of Mashiach, the light of the Geula, is so deep, it's so infinite, it's so intense, it's so powerful, that it challenges one's limited receptacles and vessels, And therefore we don't call it light. What we call it is Marriv. Shachris and Mincha I can appreciate. It's an energy that relates to me. The energy of the Geula is so profound that it challenges a person to expand their horizons, to expand their vessels. And when they don't expand their vessels, it comes across as choshech, as dark. Why is it dark? Because it's too much light for me to deal with. And when a person sometimes sees too much light, they cannot see it as light. It's too much. What they have to do is either they say it's a mishagas, they say the person saying it is crazy, or they completely dismiss it, because for me to accept it, it's too of a humbling experience. I have to say maybe everything that I thought till today was wrong. I have to completely expand my paradigms, and who's ready for that humility? It's a very profound moment of humility to be able to really open yourself up to another perspective, and that's why it's called choshech. It's too difficult, it's too painful, it's too dark. That's the secret of Maariv. That's why Tfilas Arvis is not chayva. The Sefer B'Yuri HaZoyar explains there the difference of chayva and reshus. I'll give an example in a marriage. There's some things your wife can tell you to do. Some things, the moment she tells you to do it, it already loses its glamour. You can't tell somebody to do certain things. If you do it on your own, fine. If you don't feel it on your own, I can't tell you to do it. That's a secret a lot of men don't know. You're going with your wife and she looks in the window and she'll say, this thing looks interesting. And you're supposed to figure out that she wants it as a birthday gift. The problem is that men are clueless. If you don't tell them, they don't understand. But she doesn't feel she can tell, because if he tells you, it takes out the whole emotion of it. It's going to be another line in the Ksuvah. There's a mitzvah on Friday afternoon that you have to write a card. There's a mitzvah on a birthday, you have to write a card. And I'll tell you what to write. The whole point is, it's not a chayva. There's certain things you can tell a person to do. There's certain things, if I tell you to do it, don't do it already. If you don't get it, you don't get it. This is called reshus. Reshus doesn't mean that it's less important. Reshus means it's something that has to come from a deeper place in you. When it comes from a deeper place in you, it has to be voluntary. When it becomes an obligation, then it could be robotic. There's something, however, deeper. When you say chayva, it means you have the ability to access the energy. And that's why the Torah says you have to do it. Maariv is the energy of Beis HaMikdash HaShlishi. It's the energy of Geula, it's the energy of Mashiach. I can't obligate a Jew. You have to daven Maariv. Shachris and Mincha is an energy that you can access every day. Maariv is something that is such a profound energy. You can't make it an obligation on a person, which means you can't access it. It's something that a person has to open themselves up to, strive for. And when you say it's an obligation, it means you're not understanding what you're dealing with. It's too of a profound relationship, too of a profound experience, that you can call it chayva, you have to call it reshus. According to this, what do we see? That by Yaakov Avinu, when did he daven Maariv? He davened Maariv during the daytime. Why did Yaakov daven Maariv? Of course he davened Maariv during the daytime. Yaakov was connected Bayis HaShlishi. His Maariv was a bright Maariv. His Maariv was a luminescent Maariv. Yaakov's novelty was that he revealed that energy of the Geula of the Beis HaMikdash HaShlishi, so therefore his Maariv was not shrouded in darkness and in mystery. Yaakov's Maariv was light and bright, and generally this was the story of Yaakov Avinu. To be able to reveal that which looks like darkness in life sometimes contains the deepest light. There's an old joke why Yaakov was Masakin Tfilas Arvis. If Maariv is the first davening, it should have been Avraham. The answer is because Yaakov had 12 children. So he came home at night from the field, and Leah said, Reuven has a virus. Shimon has an earache. Levi has an infection. Yehuda is terrorizing the whole house. Yisachar hasn't had a bath in 3 weeks. Zvulun is neglected. Don hasn't seen his father. I don't know how much therapy he's going to need. Naphtali doesn't say a word, and he's been thrown out of yeshiva. He's just staying home. Asher, I don't even have a chance to talk to. Yaakov, roll up your sleeves, give them all a bath, lay down in bed with them, read them books, spend time with them. So Yaakov said, Maariv. It's time to go to Maariv, right? If I was Yaakov, I would have also been Mesakin Tfilas Arvis. I would also make Arvis. Okay, so that's on a humorous level. The joke doesn't apply to Yaakov, of course, but it applies to some of us. Right? Somebody showed me a text message 2 years ago. There was a huge snow in Yerushalayim, you remember, in the winter. So there was a teacher Sunday morning, and he was about to come into school. So the principal of Meir Sharim sends him a text message. I don't know if they use text, whatever it was in Yerushalayim. He sends him a message, and that is that there's no need to show up in school today. There's a big snow, and really the students are not going to come. He says, no, I want to come anyway. He says, it's a beautiful thing. You're such a dedicated student, a teacher. But I'll tell you the truth, only 10 kids showed up in Cheder. There's really no reason for you to come. He says, yes, because here there's 15. So he wants to come to Cheder. It's easy. Okay, so on one level you have on a humorous level. But then there's a deeper level. Why Yaakov? Yaakov was the person who went through a lot of night in his life. His life was filled with transitions from one extreme to another extreme. One thing he never did was, he never despaired. He never failed to acknowledge and embrace that in the darkness, there's some deeper light. Yaakov Avinu tikkun tfilas arvis. He fixed night. He fixed darkness. He was mesaken Maariv. Yaakov Avinu was the person who would refuse to surrender to night and say, just because it's night, therefore my life is over. Yaakov is the person who teaches us how to take night and turn it into a dream. Vayishlach. And the dream is that there's always a ladder that stands on the earth, on the ground, but its top ultimately reaches heaven. And that's why he was the only one who mitasei shlema, the Gemara says in Pesachim. His entire family was wholesome. Why? Why couldn't Avram do that with Yishmael? Why couldn't Yitzchak do it with Esav? The answer is because it wasn't easy for Yaakov with all the children. Sometimes you look at a child and you could see Shachris. The sun shines. Sometimes you look at a child, maybe the sun doesn't shine, but it's an afternoon. But sometimes you look at a child and you say it's Maariv. All you could see is challenges, rebellion, darkness. Yaakov Avinu refused to believe that there is real darkness. Yaakov said there's two types of light. There's light that you could comprehend, and there's light that transcends your parameters. And that's what we call darkness. It's two forms of light. There's light that makes sense to you. There's light that settles into your system, and then there's light that challenges your system. And that light we call darkness because we're not comfortable with that light. It challenges us. It teaches me too much. I have to humble myself and dismiss all my old paradigms and say maybe it's time to look at the world from a different space, emotionally, psychologically. That's not easy. So Yaakov's Maariv is by day. Yaakov Davin's Maariv, Beis Hamikdash Hashlishi, the Geula energy, for him it's day. He sees it. It's bright. It's not shrouded in darkness and mystery. That is Yaakov's Maariv. Here we come to the big debate of Tfilas Arvis. Is it Rishus or is it Chayva? The Bnei Yissaschar writes, the Gemara says in Tainus, visit Afhei, I think, that Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, who was a grandson of Rabban Gamliel, this is Rabban Gamliel's grandson, the Nasi is continued. Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, the editor of Mishnayos, was a grandson of Rabban Gamliel, the man, the hero, the main personality of this, or one of the personalities of this story. So it was once Tisha B'Av Shechali is b'Shabbos. Tisha B'Av fell on Shabbos. So what did Rebbe say? Kiven de'itchid, let's not fast on Sunday. Well, they disagreed. We do fast on Sunday. But Rebbe held no Tisha B'Av. And Yissaschar says, why was Rebbe so particular about this? Because he came from the family of Beis David, family of Rabban Gamliel, the family of Mashiach. And therefore they always had a certain experience of Geula even in Golus. So he said once Tisha B'Av already is pushed off, Rebbe's perspective is Kivan the Itchi, push it off. Now you have Rabban Gamliel. Rabban Gamliel is the family of David. Rabban Gamliel wants Mashiach. Rabban Gamliel wants the Geula. But Rabban Gamliel also has a certain experience of Geula. Then you have a second person, Reb Shimon bar Yochai. Reb Shimon bar Yochai is the author of the Zohar. It says in the Zohar that Moshe Rabbeinu told Reb Shimon bar Yochai, Bahai Sifre Delach, Yifkun Yisrael Mibei Galusa Berachim. Through your Sefer, the Jewish people will go out of Golus through compassion. Through your Sefer, the point of Pnimiyus HaTorah, Rashi says in the beginning of Shir HaShirim, on the pasuk Yishakeni min Neshikos Piyu Ki Tovim Deidachem Miyayim, that when Mashiach comes, Asid Legalas Soit Ha'Meha U'Mistar Tzvunei Se'ah, Rashi says. When Mashiach comes, he's going to reveal the secrets of Torah. The Rambam says in the end of Hilchos Malachim, when Mashiach comes, Lo yiyeh eisa kol olam kulei ela ladas es Hashem bilvad shenemar ki mola oretz deyes Hashem kamayim le'yom echasi. There will be the revelation of the depth of the world, the depth of humanity, the depth of Torah, and the core of existence. So you have Rabban Gamliel and Reb Shimon ben Yochai. They want to introduce the consciousness of redemption even in the thicket of exile under Roman barbaric dictatorship. How do you do? Everything comes through Torah. The first question is Tfilas Arvis Rishus or Chayva? If Tfilas Arvis is Rishus, it means it's something I can't access for sure. If Tfilas Arvis is Chayva, that means Hashem, the Torah wants you and says you have to daven Maariv. What does have to mean? Have to means this is your reality. This is your design. You're capable of accessing it. And that's why I can obligate you to do it. I can't obligate somebody to do something that they're not capable of accessing. It's not fear. It's cruel. So Reb Shimon bar Yochai, who's the author of Zohar, wants Tfilas Arvis to be L'chayra Chayva. Rabban Gamliel, who is from the family of David HaMelech, says, of course Arvis is Chayva. Rabbi Yehusha says, absolutely not. Rabban Gamliel is living in a high state. Gamliel is the letters of Gamli, Kael. God gives me. Goybel chasodim toivim. God gives me. Gamliel. Gamal Kael. God gives. Yehoshua is from the word Ka. Hoshea. God should help. There's a difference between Goymel and Yeshua. Here is a state where you need help. Here is a state where God gives. Rabbi Yehusha is living in an exile. Rabbi Yehusha says, we are not capable of telling people that Tfilas Arvis is Chayva, that Maariv is an obligation, that people can access that energy. Tfilas Arvis is available, but it ultimately remains something extraordinary. I cannot make it part of the present day consciousness like Rabban Gamliel. So when he asks Rabban Gamliel, Rabbi Yehusha, what's Maariv? Rabbi Yehusha says it's Rishus. Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai doesn't want that. He goes to Rabban Gamliel. Gamliel says it's obligatory. He says, but Rabbi Yehusha says it's voluntary. Rabbi Gamliel says, let's see what happens in the Beis Medrash. They come into the Beis Medrash. Rabbi Gamliel says it's obligatory. Does anybody disagree with me? Who gets up to say no? Rabbi Yehusha. This is the strangest part of the story. You don't want to admit what you hold for whatever reason. You're afraid. Don't say anything. There were maybe dozens of people in the Beis Medrash, maybe hundreds. Rabbi Yehusha has to get up and say clearly the opposite of what he just said. It's such a strange thing. Let Rabbi Yehusha, let somebody else talk. When does Rabbi Yehusha hold that Tfilas Arvis is Rishus? Only when he's not in the presence of Rabban Gamliel. When Rabbi Yehusha is in the presence of Rabban Gamliel, then Tfilas Arvis becomes Chayva. Why? They once came to the Chassam Sofer. They asked the Chassam Sofer why there were Chassidim that would go to their Rebbes for Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur, and they couldn't speak to them. There was too many people, too little time. So the point was they would daven together in the same shul. They told the Chassam Sofer, what a waste of time. You go to somebody, you learn from them, you talk to them, you speak to them, they teach you. But here they go, they daven, and they go home. It's a waste of time. Chassam Sofer. So the Chassam Sofer answered a very interesting answer. He said, we have in Tumas Meis, the halachas in Parshas Chukas Tumas Meis, if there's a tent, and the tent stretches, I'll just say 10 miles, a big tent, and somebody, Chalila, dies on one corner of the tent, and somebody's on the other side of the tent, he doesn't even know that there's a corpse. What's the halacha? He becomes completely tummy, and the biggest tumah, avi avois. The mace is avi avois, he becomes an am. And you need to bring the paraduma, the ashes and the water, and sprinkle on him. The third day and the seventh day he has to go to the mikveh. Tumas mace. Why? The answer is he was under the same tent. And when you're under the same roof, the energy that's under the roof transfers to everybody else in the roof. So the Chassam Sofer says, Madach, when it comes to tumah, to impurity, you say that it's so powerful that when you're under the same roof, the tumah goes from one end to another end, unless you're out of the tent. For sure, when it comes to Tara, when it comes to holiness, to goodness, that the radiance of somebody on one side of the tent being under the same roof like them already changes you. Maybe consciously, maybe unconsciously, maybe in a way that you're cognizant of it, you're not cognizant of it. That's what Rabbi Yehusha says. As long as I'm in my own world, Tfilas Arvis is Rishus. But here I'm in the presence of Rabban Gamliel. Rabban Gamliel is the successor of David HaMelech. David Melech Yisrael Chai V'Kayim. The Gemara says about Yaakov Avinu in Masechta Tainis Daf Hey, Yaakov Avinu loy meis. Ma zarei b'chayim afu b'chayim. There's an element of Yaakov that is not subjected to death. David Melech Yisrael Chai V'Kayim. So Rabbi Yehusha says here, Tfilas Arvis is chayva. Sometimes you're in an atmosphere where there's a geula consciousness. When I go back to my own house, when I go back to my own problems, I'm going to sink into the abyss. But here in the presence of Rabban Gamliel, everyone can access Maariv. Everybody can access that darkness, which is really a higher form of light. Sometimes you're in an environment, sometimes you're in a space, in a zone, geographically or spiritually, where you are in a different space. We all know it in our own life that there were moments when you're in the presence of somebody, or in the presence of something, or in the presence of yourself, in a deeper space where you were capable of seeing things in a certain way, feeling things in a certain way. Of course, then you go back on your heads. You go back to life and everything is over. It's all over. So Rabbi Yehusha says, here in this base medrash, Tfilas Arvis is chayva. Here nobody argues with it. He says, he is the one who knows best, because he is the one who maintains the perspective of Amcha, the perspective of humanity, that Tfilas Arvis Rishus. But he says, here, Tfilas Arvis is chayva. The Maisa about Reb Mendel Haradoker. The Mezritcha Maggid had a student who's the author of Pri Haaretz, Reb Menachem Mendel of Vitebsk or Haradoker. And he made Aliyah to Tveria in the year Tovkuf Memches, the first Aliyah, one of the first Aliyahs of Chassidim to Eretz Yisrael. Together, the students of the Vilna Gaon made an Aliyah, and the Chassidim made an Aliyah. So he went up, and he moved to Tveria. And he's buried over there in the old cemetery in Tveria, the Baal Pri Haaretz. Reb Menachem Mendel of Vitebsk. I'm sorry, he passed away Tovkuf Memches. His Aliyah was Tovkuf Lamed Zayin, 1777. Reb Menachem Mendel Vitebsk, or Haradoker, as some people call him, was living in Tveria. One day, I'm a shuganer, an imbecile went up to the Har HaZeisim, went up to the Mount of Olives with a shofar, and he started to blow. New Jews hear that somebody's blowing shofar on Har HaZeisim. Jews are optimistic Jews. So what do they say right away? The WhatsApp messages sent a message that Eliyahu Hanavi is blowing shofar on the Har HaZeisim. Simcha and shtetl. The Jews wait for Mashiach. Eliyahu Hanavi is blowing shofar gewaldig. The news traveled till Tveria, and they told Reb Mendel Haradoker, it looks like Eliyahu Hanavi is here blowing shofar, Mashiach is coming. So Reb Mendel Haradoker went to his window, and he opened his window, and he stuck out his head, and he sniffed. He gave a smell. And he shed a tear, and he said, Leider nicht. Unfortunately, not yet. So the Chassidim used to ask, why did he have to open the window and smell outside of the window? And the answer is, because in his home, there was always a reyach of Mashiach. There was always an aroma of a geula consciousness. So in his home, he couldn't smell. He would smell, he would say, it's here. He had to go outside of his house and see what's happening in the outside world. So Rabbi Yehusha says, as long as I'm in the presence of Rabban Gamliel's Tfilas Arvis Chayvus, Rabban Gamliel turns to him and says, they said that you hold Tfilas Arvis Rishus. So when Rabbi Yehusha said, I lied? No, Rabbi Yehusha gave a gewaldic answer. He says, Ilu hu meis. If it was a contrast between life and death, the life could deny that living could deny the dead. We're dealing here with the Bechina of Yaakov Avinu, which is loy meis. We're dealing with the Bechina of Yaakov Avinu, the Maariv, which is loy meis. We're dealing in the presence of Rabbi Gamliel, who comes from David Melech Yisrael. The Gemara says in Rosh Hashanah Chafei, David Melech Yisrael, Chai v'Kaya. So you have the combination of Yaakov and David. Over here, it's a whole different reality. Over here, Tfilas Arvis is not Rishus. Over here, Tfilas Arvis is Chayva. That's what Rabbi Gamliel times. That's what Rabbi Yehusha explains to Raban Gamliel. That's why it says, it's brought in Svarim, the Legabe Neshamas of the great Tanoim, says like Gabi Rashbi, Loi Nechrav Habayis. They were in a state of consciousness that the Churban Habayis didn't have an internal effect on their consciousness, not because they didn't know what's happening in the world, because their connection was such that the intimacy was never, ever compromised. Now, I ask you a question. What is the difference between the time of Golus and the time of Mashiach in terms of serving Hashem? What happens when Mashiach comes? One of the key differences is the issue of Toiche Kabari, the inside and the outside. The expression of Rabban Gamliel is Kol mi she'ein Toiche Kabari lo yikanos l'beis hamedrash. Whoever is inside is not like his outside, shouldn't go into the Beis HaMedrash. Shouldn't it have been the other way? Shouldn't it be Kol mi she'ein barei ketoiche? Right? He says Kol mi she'ein Toiche Kabari. If you're inside, is not like you're outside. Shouldn't it be the other way? If you're outside, is not like your inside lo yikanas lebeis hamedrash. He says no. If your inside is not like your outside. Kol mi shein toichai kebar. The Arizal says if you look at the word toichai, it's taf vav chav vav. If you look at the word kebarai, so what do you have? Kebarai is chav beis reish vav. In kebarai, the first letter is chav, the last letter is vav. In toichai, the vav chav is inside. Chav vav is the numerology of Shem Havaya. Toichai means the name of Hashem is inside. Vav chav is inside. 626. Kebarai, the Shem Havaya is on the outside. Chav vav. Kol mi shein toichai kebarai means that the toichai is not the kebarai. By kebarai, the Shem Havaya is on the outside. By toichai, the Shem Havaya is on the inside. What does this mean in a person's life? There's two different models in Avodas Hashem. One is known I'll use the terms that are used in Tanya often, from the Zohar. One is known as iskafia, and one is known as ishapcha. Iskafia means subjugation. Ishapcha means transformation. To be a little more accurate, ishapcha is metamorphosis. You change it, mahapech, benapech. Iskafia means you don't transform, you identify. To give a simple example, ishapcha is a situation where a person works on themselves so deeply that their self is transformed. Let's say yesterday I had a craving for something that was extremely counterproductive or destructive. Today it's cleared up. I don't have it anymore. Iskafia means no, I have it and I struggle with it, but I can identify it. And because I can identify it, I don't have to become a slave to it. The great challenge of people's lives is not that they have struggles, is that they don't identify what comes from what. The moment you can realize that this comes from your klipa and this comes from your kedusha, you're already in good shape. The moment I could say this comes from my shells and this comes from my inner substance, then I could already choose how I want to live. The challenge is not that we have different forces. The challenge is that they're mixed up. We don't know what's what. We don't know what to place where. The moment I could say, this comes from my higher self, this comes from my lower self, this comes from childhood wounds. Oh, really? If this comes from childhood wounds, you don't have to live by it. It's there. It's a demon. If you can identify it, you can quarantine it, you can put it in its place, you're good. It's not ishapcha. Ishapcha means there's no struggle. I transform myself. I recreate myself. Iskafia, I don't recreate myself, but I can identify what's toiv in me, what's not toiv in me, what is my higher self, what is my lower self, what is my true self, what is a more superficial self, what is a self that is just responding to old stories, and what is a self that is really how I want to live. That's what iskafia is. In this world, the model generally of avodas Hashem is iskafia. In the future world, the model is ishapcha. Where do you see it? The pasuk says, "Ki borach ha'am." When the Jews left Mitzrayim, they had to escape. La'asid lavi, the pasuk says in Yeshaya, "Loi b'chipazin telechu, b'shuva v'nachas tivashen." You won't run. You're going to go in a relaxed way. What's the difference? By Yetzias Mitzrayim, we had to run. You know why? Because we had to run from something in ourselves. When Mashiach comes, you don't have to run from anything. By Yetzias Mitzrayim, you could take a Jew out of Mitzrayim, you can't take Mitzrayim out of the Jew, so therefore I have to run because it's something in me. And if I don't run from it, I will fall. But if I'm in completely holistic place, then I don't have to run. I don't have to struggle with something in me that I have to run away from. I could be extremely calm because there's no force in me that's going to undermine me. Therefore, Rabban Gamliel and Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah have two different views. Rabban Gamliel maintains tfilas arvis chayva. In his world, that's true. Rabbi Yehusha says, as long as we're in your world, that's the case. In our world, tfilas arvis is not chayva. What's the difference? Rabban Gamliel says, Kol mi shein toichi kebara lo yikanas lebeis hamedrash. If your inside is not like your outside, don't come into the beis medrash. Rabban Gamliel was not talking about people whose outside is not like their inside. Their inside is not like their outside. Their outside was wonderful. But Rabban Gamliel knew that inside is not like outside. He says the beis medrash is not for you. You're not there. Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah said, no, that's the model of l'osid lava. That's ishapcha. You want people who are transformed. That's not the model for today. Even if ain't toicha kabara, you have to open up the beis medrash. Judaism was not created for perfect people. To live a life of happiness and serenity doesn't mean you have no skeletons, no demons, no ghosts. These are unrealistic expectations that are messianic. But in this world, that's not what freedom is called. Freedom in this world means I can identify what's what, and I choose what to go with. That's what freedom in this world is. In a future world, freedom is I'm completely free. Free of all stress, free of all issues, free of all baggage. In this world, that's not freedom. Galus Mitzrayim, Geulas Mitzrayim doesn't mean there's no para in me. Para is still in me. I know how to run away from him. I can't relax. It's always in me. But I know how to run away. That is freedom in our day. Therefore, when they say Rebbe Elazar ben Azariah has to be the Nasi, Rabban Gamliel can't be the Nasi. Why can't Rabban Gamliel be the Nasi? The worst thing is when a leader is not in tune with his generation. If I'm not in tune with my generation, I create standards that they can't relate to. So if I come and I teach a Judaism that demands spiritual perfection, how many people do you have? You have 1 in a generation, 3 in a generation. What about everybody else sitting in the Beis Medrash? They can't relate to you. So what do? Either they fake it, or they become disillusioned. Either they fake, they're not real people. Right? You ever heard of that concept? They make believe that they're connected. They're so disconnected in a way that it's frightening. And sometimes they get so disconnected that they don't even realize how disconnected they are. Because they have to so disconnect from themselves. So they can't even be honest about what's happening with them emotionally. Or the other extreme, they become disillusioned. Rabbi Gamliel can't be the leader. Rabbi Yeshua, Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah has to be the leader. He comes to his wife says, white hair, you don't have white hair, you don't have experience. So what happens now? What happens is he grows white hair. What is that? This represents the victory of Iskafia over Ishapcha. When I have white hair on the outside, I look like an old man, a seasoned man. On the inside, I'm still 18 years old. Heaven was saying, don't delegitimize the fact that people's insides and outsides in this world are not seamlessly one. This is not the world in which you can demand from a person that the inside and the outside are always the same. That if the person has something going on, they give up on themselves. I'm a slave, you're not a slave. Identify it in you and continue marching, and that's called freedom. It's not a small thing. Now, the Gemara continues over there in the Brachas that day, even Rabban Gamliel did not stay out of the Beis Medrash, even for a moment. He was upset, but he himself did not stay out from the Beis Medrash. You might think Rabban Gamliel ultimately disagrees with this, so we say no. We mention Yitzias Mitzrayim even la'asid lava. In other words, even when Mashiach comes, you value the world of Iskafia, and that's why Rabban Gamliel himself shows up in the Beis Medrash. So now Rabban Gamliel has a dream. The dream says white pitchers filled with ashes. The Gemara says it wasn't real. So what, Hashem showed him a dream and it was fake? What is this? One big political cholent? The pshat is no. Mitzad Rabban Gamliel, who lives in the consciousness of Geula, Iskafia is not the path. It's not the path. Mitzad avoid of most people, Iskafia is the path. Both are true. For Rabban Gamliel, this model, it's a pitcher filled with ashes. Was Rebbe Elazar ben Azariah though wrong? Of course he wasn't wrong. That is serving God in the time of Golus. It means you have skeletons, you have demons, you have a Yetzer Hara, you have an ego, you have fears, you have whatever you have. You identify them and you make them not the leaders of your life. That's the difference. When this happens, Rabban Gamliel suddenly identifies the greatness of the other side. He sees the miracle with the white hair. He sees what happened with Rabbi Yehusha, how the halacha is like him. So he says, let me go apologize. He goes into his house and he sees that the walls are dark. What does this represent? That there's still darkness. In other words, that Maariv is not always when it's light. Maariv is also when it's dark. He sees darkness in the house. So he tells Rabbi Yehusha, it looks like you deal with charcoal. It looks like you're a smith who deals with things that are unclean. So Rabbi Yehusha says, woe to a generation that you are a leader. You don't know what people deal with. You don't know what Talmidei Chachamim live off from. It wasn't just a question of his parnasa. It was a general idea. You live in a state of expansive consciousness, and you're not sensitive to a generation that deals with blackness, that deals with darkness. There's a story about a Yid, a Chassid, his name was Reb Shmuel Munkus. Reb Shmuel Munkus was one of the very big Talmidim of the Baal HaTanya of the Alter Rebbe. The first time he came to see him, he lived in the Baal HaTanya lived in a city called Liozna, a town. It's in Belarus. And he happened to arrive there in the middle of the night. And he didn't know where the Rebbe lives, so he was looking around the city in Liozna, and he saw a house that had light in it, a lantern burning. So he thought he'll ask where the Baal HaTanya lives. So he knocks on the door. It happened to be the house of the Baal HaTanya. The Baal HaTanya was learning, so he opened the door himself. So Reb Shmuel Munkus introduces himself, and he says, he looked at the person, and he speculated this was the Alter Rebbe, and he says, Shalom Aleichem. So he says, Was tust du da mitten Nacht? Why did you come here in the middle of the night? So Shmuel Munkus says, Ich habe nicht gewusst, dass bei a Rebbe is da Nacht. I didn't know that by a Rebbe there's night. So he says, what did you come here? He says, I want to stay here. He says, Nishtoken under the Stibber, you can't stay by another house. He says, Das ist nicht kein jüdischer Stub. This is not a Jewish house, I want to stay here. Baal HaTanya says, go stay in another house. He says, no, I want to stay in your house. So the Alter Rebbe says, I'm going to call the Gentile, he's going to chase you out. So Shmuel Munkus started to cry and he said, Rebbe, mein Goy is a sach starker wie dein Goy. My Gentile is a lot stronger than your Gentile. So he took him into the house. At surface, it's a strange exchange. He comes in the middle of the night. It wasn't a question of arachnos asarcha. It was a question if you could connect to him, if he would accept him as a student, if they belong to each other. If they belong to each other. So first he tells him, I didn't think there's night by the Rebbe. There's no night here. It's not called the middle of the night. And this is what concerned him, because what happens often is, you look for a spiritual high, you look for a great man, you find the person, and then you're flying high, but you're in denial of the darkness that lurks within your soul. And therefore he says, my path is not for you. Trust me, my path is not for you. You're looking for somebody else. Only when Reb Shmuel Munkus told him, mein Goy is starker wie dein Goy. Don't think I come to you not knowing about what's inside of me. I know everything that's inside of me. Then he could accept it. Because this was already, he understood, that his mahalach, his derech, and avodas Hashem will be able to be something that he'll be able to internalize. Because he's not running away from that fact. So the Shimon and Rabbi Yehusha says, how do you not know that the walls of our house are black? Rabban Gamliel apologizes. And ultimately they bring Rabban Gamliel back, but they split it up. 3 weeks Rabban Gamliel, and 1 week Rebbe Lazar ben Azariah. What happens now? The Gemara says that who was the student who did all of this? Reb Shimon bar Yochai. If the Gemara would say in the beginning it was Reb Shimon bar Yochai, throughout the story you would think, Reb Shimon bar Yochai really made a churban here. He really made a tumul here. He destroyed the whole situation. That would be disgraceful. So the Gemara doesn't say his name. At the end of the story, Reb Shimon bar Yochai was brought in. What did Reb Shimon bar Yochai accomplish? He created that there should be 2 leaders. 3 weeks should be Rabban Gamliel, and 1 week should be Rebbe Lazar ben Azariah, all because of what he did. What did he try to do? Reb Shimon bar Yochai wanted to link the 2 worlds. He wanted the Jewish people should be able to receive 2 states of energy. The energy of Rabban Gamliel and the energy of Rebbe Lazar ben Azariah. He wanted that even in Golus, in a Golus consciousness, there should be able to be a consciousness of Geula. Reb Shimon bar Yochai, who was the author of Zohar, ultimately what he accomplished was he ran back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. He synthesized the situation. That even in a world where Rabban Gamliel's revelation is not yet present, because we don't paskin tfilas arvis chayva, we paskin tfilas arvis rishus, like Rabbi Yehusha, at least many halachic authorities. And our Maariv may be at night, not by day. In other words, it's not Yaakov's Maariv, it's not Rabban Gamliel's Maariv. Still, there should be able to be an openness and a study of the consciousness of Rabban Gamliel, and that's what Reb Shimon bar Yochai tried to accomplish with the Sefer Azariah. That's why the first thing Rebbe Lazar ben Azariah says when he becomes a Nasi is, Harei ani kiven shivim shana, v'lo zachisi shetami yitzias Mitzrayim ba'leilos. Why is that the first thing? Because that's the whole issue. It's easy to remember redemption during daytime. It's very hard to remember redemption at night. When things are bright, you could remember Yetzias Mitzrayim. When things are dark, when it's nighttime, who remembers Yetzias Mitzrayim? So Rebbe Elazar ben Azariah says, I learned today that Yetzias Mitzrayim you could remember even at night. Even in the nighttime of Tfilas Arvis Rishus. Not like Rabban Gamliel. You could mention Yetzias Mitzrayim because the model of Iskafia pervades throughout history, even before you have the full experience of the model of Ishapcha. On the other hand, Reb Shimon bar Yochai wanted Rabban Gamliel to be restored because Iskafia must be inspired by the model of Ishapcha. If a person looks at themselves and sees themselves as essentially bad and full of skeletons, they can't even control it. A person has to understand the infinite power of their goodness. They have to understand that they're capable of transformation. Even before that, they're still capable of redemption. According to all of this, Tosfos's answer, Tosfos's question becomes answered. Is Maariv by day or by night? The first Maariv was by day. Why should Maariv be by night? Yaakov David Maariv by day. Maariv is not something reserved for darkness. Maariv could be seen, Maariv could be experienced, Maariv could be perceived. Because of our limitations, Maariv becomes at night. Yaakov Avinu's Maariv was day. Yaakov Avinu experienced the consciousness of Maariv. Our limitations mean that for us Maariv is dark because it's too much light, so therefore I can't experience it in a process of day. I experience it in a process of night. If that's the case, Rabbi Akiva, Rabbi Yehusha, Rabban Gamliel are at a meat market. And why are they at the meat market? To buy meat for the wedding of Rabban Gamliel's son. This is not a wedding, regular wedding. This wedding will continue the dynasty of David, the dynasty of Hillel, the dynasty of Rabban Gamliel, the dynasty of Rabbi Gamliel, the dynasty of the family of royalty, the dynasty of Geula. At that meat market, when they're preparing for that wedding, Rabbi Akiva brings up a question. And what's the question? Why did the sun shine for Yaakov? It shined for the whole world. What was the answer? The answer was it set for Yaakov especially. So it rose up for Yaakov specially. Why did it set for Yaakov specially? So the Gemara explains that Yaakov davened before sunset. In other words, at the preparing for the wedding of Rabban Gamliel's son, they discovered that Yaakov is davening Maariv before sunset. Because at the preparation for the wedding of Rabban Gamliel's son, they felt acutely the energy of redemption being passed from one generation to another generation. And therefore that Maariv is during the day. That Maariv is during night, during light, during brightness. That Maariv that Yaakov Avinu davened was before night. And even, not according to Rabbi Yehuda, we said according to the Medrash, it was 2 hours before sunset. In other words, it wasn't only semi-dark, plot. It was completely daytime. Now the question is, what's the halacha? So the Gemara says there's no halacha. The Ovid Kamar of it, the Ovid Kamar of it. If you follow the Yehuda, it's fine. If you follow the Chum, it's fine. There's two paths. There's a Maariv that you could sometimes daven during the day. There's a Maariv that you can't daven during the day. Different people have different paths. Rabban Gamliel had one path. Rabbi Yehusha had a different path. Abaya had one path. He holds like Rabban Gamliel. Rava had a different path. He holds like Rabbi Yeshua. Reb Shimon bar Yochai tried to synthesize both. You have the Maariv of night. You have the Maariv of day. You have the Maariv of Rabbi Yehuda's during the day. You have the Maariv of the Chachamim during the night. It's two paths. For some people, the vision of the Beis Hamikdash Ashlishi could be revealed during daytime. For some people, it can't. It comes in a darker way. It's revealed through a deeper challenge, through a deeper darkness. They cannot relate to it in an experiential way at the moment. And on the contrary, they have to find it within struggle. Their path is Eskafia, not Eshapcha. This is during the weekdays. On Shabbos, we pass them like Rabbi Yehuda. Friday night, we pass them like Rabbi Yehuda. Because every Shabbos is a foretaste of Yom Shekulei Shabbos of Menucha L'chaya Ha'olam. So therefore, Shabbos is a foretaste of La'asad Lavei, of Mashiach, Me'ein the Yom Shekulei Shabbos. So therefore, Shabbos, the halacha is that you could daven Maariv early, even if in other days you can't daven Maariv early. Because Shabbos is a unique situation when a person could daven Maariv early. So that's why on Shabbos, the halacha is like Rabbi Yehuda. So therefore, according to this, it comes together. Because if you start off with the meat market, we understand why Rabbi Akiva discussed this at the meat market. We understand why they went all to the wedding. We understand why Rabbi Akiva decided to discuss this precisely in this place. And why the Gemara emphasizes it, we also understand the answer and questions of Tosfos. How can Maariv be at night when Yaakov Avinu did it by day? Because that is the uniqueness of Tfilas Maariv. We also understand why it's Keneged Eivarim Ubdarim that are burnt at night when it's only B'diavad L'chatchila. It should be done during the day. In other words, that's the whole point of Maariv. Maariv is really a day tefillah. That's what it is. That's when you burn the limbs. It's just based on our limitations. We do it at night, and we understand the whole path in the Machloikas that Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai instigated. If Tfilas Arvis is Rishus or Chayva, the two paths that exist in the Jewish world between Iskafi and Ishapcha. And ultimately in today's day, Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah triumphs when he says that even somebody who's inside is not like his outside. His outside is wonderful, but inside he still has struggles and challenges. He could still go into the Beis Medrash. He has a place of dignity in the fact that the walls are black, and you're dealing with charcoal, and you're a smith, and you're dealing with all of this does not delegitimize the person's relationship with Hashem. On the contrary, there's maskirin yitzias mitzrayim ba'leilos. Even in nighttime, there is redemption. And even if only the hair is white and inside he's not white, nonetheless, that's considered somebody who could be a nasi, even though Rabban Gamliel has a different path. And ultimately, Reb Shimon bar Yochai brings together the two peoples that the Jewish people should always be able to understand. The ability and the empowerment to always understand that even in a world where Tfilas Arvis is voluntary, they should be able to appreciate a world in which Tfilas Arvis is obligatory, because ultimately, Ishapcha is not only the prerogative or the privilege of few, it's really the true essence of every single person. Have a wonderful week.
This class is brought to you by theyeshiva.net. Please help us continue the classes. Make even a small contribution at www.theyeshiva.net/donate.